So we have new video this morning. This is coming from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. They say it's artillery fire hitting a convoy. And we've just learned that a delegation from Ukraine is now en route to talks with Russia. The very latest ahead.
Russia is stepping up its attacks on major cities in Ukraine. The United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine saying that it has reported 752 civilian casualties since the beginning of the Russian invasion. Joining us now is Independent Senator Angus King of Maine. He is a member of both the Intelligence and the Armed Services Committees, and he caucuses with Democrats in the Senate. Sir, I want to ask you, I mean, that is a huge number, 752, and we expect that that is a low estimate. The president has said it's too early to say that there's war crimes. Do you think there's war crimes?
Well, you need an investigation, you need all the facts, but we're now hearing that the Russians are using cluster bombs and what are called vacuum bombs, which suck the air out of a building. Look, if somebody tells you who they are, you should believe them. And 20 years ago, Putin told us who he was by the brutal bombing in Chechnya, and I'm afraid that's where we're headed now. That's his playbook, and it's going to impact on civilians. They're not having great success on the battlefield in the sense of moving their armored vehicles into the cities. So I think the next phase we're going to see is more bombing, more targeting of civilians. And I think Mr. Putin has to think about what he's going to have to face when this is over. I think he's already lost this war. He may have short-term gains. They may take over the cities, but they're not going to be able to hold a country that is so absolutely hostile to them. He's created a Ukrainian identity and patriotism that I just don't see how the Russians will be able to continue to control Ukraine for any length of time after the hostilities cease. I hope he's going to find an off-ramp.
He does not seem deterred by any of that, right? And so if you're looking at these weapons that are being moved in and we believe used in some cases, you know, waiting for Vladimir Putin to step on the brakes doesn't really seem like a possibility. What are the real repercussions? Because if there aren't any, it is not satisfying to watch.
Well, he's seeing repercussions right now, and it's a fair question whether sanctions affect dictators. They're going to affect the people of Russia. They already are. The stock market is closed. The ruble is down to less than a cent. Their economy is absolutely collapsing. But does he care? He's still got his Dacia and his Mercedes, and that's a really good question. On the other hand, people are now, we're talking about refugees leaving Poland. I'm learning this morning that people are leaving Russia in large numbers, and they're trying to stop them at the border. That's a bad sign when you have to lock people into your own country. The question you asked, though, is the right one. What motivates Putin? What's going to change his course? And the thing that concerns me is he's cornered now. He's got to realize that he's made a big mistake. And the question is, how does he get out and try to save some face? And that's what I'm mildly hopeful about these discussions, because I think he realizes that his long-term prospects aren't very good. But everybody's trying to psychoanalyze him. Is he hinged or unhinged? But he has this messianic belief that it's his role in history to reunite the Russian Empire.
He certainly does. He certainly does seem to have that belief. We just heard from a member of the Ukrainian parliament who is calling for a few things, none of which the U.S. seems to have an appetite for, the West. But let's start with the first one, a no-fly zone or an Iron Dome provided for Ukraine. Why is that not a possibility?
Well, I don't think a no-fly zone is feasible, because that really would be a very substantial escalation of the conflict and would almost inevitably turn into a war between the U.S. or NATO and Russia. A no-fly zone means you're shooting down the other guy's airplanes. And once that begins, that's a dangerous escalation. On the other hand...
Iron Dome, though?
Well, I think missile defense should be an option. whether you could deploy something like Iron Dome in this emergency situation. But don't forget the Stingers. Stingers are ground-to-air missiles. They've been used very effectively, and they're already bringing down Russian aircraft. So and Stingers are coming into the country from the U.S. and from NATO countries, and I think that is going to be an important part of at least some air defense for the Ukrainians. And they also, the Javelin missiles are their anti-tank, anti-armor facility weapons, and they're already taking a toll, and those are on the way into the country. So if we can keep them supplied, that's going to make this into a real ugly slog for the Russians.
I think it is logical, some of these limitations that the U.S. and the West are facing. This is not a NATO country. But I wonder if you worry about the message this sends to emerging democracies or to democracies that are moving in the direction the U.S. wants, but they are not NATO members, they are not full-fledged EU members. Do you worry about that?
No, I think we've armed the Ukrainians, we've trained them, we've worked with them substantially, we're making substantial contributions to their defense.